Jeremy clutched the crumpled job advertisement in his hand. He desperately needed work. Weeks had passed since his last paycheck, and his funds were beyond depleted. The ad was for a caretaker position at Ashmere Manor in a remote town. But Jeremy was desperate. He had to take the job. He packed his meager belongings and set off for Ashmere. The town was quiet, eerily so. It felt abandoned. A sense of unease settled upon Jeremy as he drove toward the manor. The road was dark. Trees lined either side, their branches heavy with unseen things. The manor loomed in the distance. It was a Gothic monstrosity with a crumbling facade and a sense of foreboding that was almost palpable. The manor was imposing. It stood tall and menacing against the darkening sky. Ivy crawled up its walls, seeming to pull the structure down into the overgrown lawns. Jeremy parked his car in the overgrown driveway and stepped out into the oppressive silence. He took a deep breath. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. The heavy oak door creaked open as if warning him. The entrance hall was dark and dusty. Cobwebs hung from every corner. The air was stale and cold. Jeremy shivered. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The silence was broken only by the sound of his own footsteps echoing through the empty hall. He coughed, the sound jarring in the stillness. There was a presence here. He could feel it. A man in a dark suit greeted him. The man was pale and gaunt, with sunken dark eyes. He introduced himself as Mr. Blackwood, the manor's solicitor. Blackwood showed Jeremy around. The manor was filled with dusty furniture and faded grandeur. They reached the grand staircase. A large portrait hung on the wall. It was of a beautiful woman with piercing blue eyes and a melancholic smile. "That's Sarah Ashmere," Mr. Blackwood said, his voice a raspy whisper. "The last resident of this manor." Jeremy felt a chill as he stared at the portrait. Sarah's eyes seemed to follow him, holding a strange intensity, as if she was trying to communicate something. That night, Jeremy lay awake. He was alone in the darkness. The silence was broken by strange noises, creaking floorboards, whispers, and the sound of footsteps. He tried to ignore them, telling himself it was just the old house settling. But deep down, fear gnawed at him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. One night, he awoke to a cold touch on his cheek. He sat up, his heart pounding. A white mist swirled at the foot of his bed. It coalesced into the shape of a woman. He recognized her instantly. It was Sarah Ashmere. Her face was pale and sorrowful. Her eyes held a deep sadness. Section 5. The Ghostly Apparition. Sarah's ghostly image floated closer. Jeremy was paralyzed with fear. He couldn't move. He could only watch as she approached. Her voice when she spoke was a mournful whisper. She spoke of betrayal, of a broken heart, and a desperate longing for peace. Jeremy listened. He was both terrified and strangely drawn to her sorrow. Night after night, Sarah's ghost visited Jeremy. Each encounter fueled his fear. He became withdrawn and terrified. He avoided the portrait of Sarah. He couldn't bear to meet her eyes. He knew he had to leave the manor. He had to escape Sarah's tormented spirit. Section 6. Fleeing in Terror. One night, Sarah's ghost appeared angrier than before. Her voice echoed through the manor. It shook the very foundations of the house. Jeremy was filled with a primal fear. He knew he had to escape. He ran from his room. He didn't look back. He raced through the darkened corridors, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear Sarah's mournful cries echoing behind him. They seemed to be getting closer. He stumbled and fell. He scrambled to his feet. He kept running. He had to get out of the manor. He had to escape the torment of Sarah's ghost. Section 7. A desperate attempt. Jeremy reached the front door. He fumbled with the handle. It wouldn't open. Panic surged through him. He was trapped. He turned to face his pursuer. He braced himself for the inevitable, but the hallway was empty. He was alone. He slammed his shoulder against the door again and again. It wouldn't budge. He was trapped. He could hear Sarah's voice again. It was closer now. It was filled with rage and despair. He knew he couldn't escape. He sank to the floor, defeated. Section 8. Trapped. Jeremy slumped against the cold wood of the door. He was defeated. He closed his eyes. He waited for Sarah's ghost to claim him. He could hear her voice. It was right behind him now. It was filled with an unbearable sadness. Suddenly, the door swung open. Jeremy tumbled out onto the ground. He looked up. He was met with the astonished face of an elderly woman. She stared at him, her eyes wide with concern. Section 9. A Glimmer of Hope. The woman helped Jeremy to his feet. She introduced herself as Mrs. Hawthorne. She lived in the village. She had seen the lights on in the manor. She knew it was supposed to be empty. She decided to investigate. She had saved him from Sarah's wrath. Jeremy looked back at the manor. It seemed less menacing in the moonlight. He realized the truth. He wasn't trapped by Sarah's ghost. He was trapped by his own fear. Section 10. Freedom. Jeremy left Ashmere the next morning. He didn't look back. He never wanted to see the manor again. He thanked Mrs. Hawthorne for her kindness. He left the village. He vowed to never return. He drove until he reached the outskirts of a bustling town. He stopped at a diner. He ordered a cup of coffee. He sat there for a long time. He just stared out the window. He was safe. He was free. Section 11. The Whispering Town. The memory of Ashmere Manor and Sarah's ghost stayed with him. It was a chilling reminder of the darkness that could lurk in the shadows. He often wondered about the truth behind Sarah Ashmere's sorrow and the secrets that lay buried within the manor walls. He knew he would never have the answers, and he was okay with that. Jeremy never forgot the haunting of Ashmere Manor. It was a terrifying experience that changed him forever. He learned that some places hold secrets. Some secrets are best left buried.